The first light of day creeps across the vast expanse of the Utah desert, painting the sandstone formations in hues of amber and gold. The morning air carries a crisp bite, characteristic of early autumn in this unforgiving landscape. Shadows stretch long across the cracked earth, revealing a terrain both beautiful and merciless. The hunter moves methodically through the sparse vegetation, his weathered boots leaving faint impressions in the sandy soil. 52 years of age, with 17 of those spent tracking game across these remote backcountry areas, his movements betray the confidence of a man intimately familiar with his environment. His face, tanned and lined from years under the desert sun, remains expressionless as he studies the ground before him. This morning ritual had become something of a meditation for the hunter. Since losing his wife to cancer 3 years prior, these solitary expeditions offered a rare peace that eluded him back in the modest home they once shared with their children, now grown and scattered across different states. His teenage daughter still lived with him, but their relationship had grown strained in the aftermath of her mother's passing. The hunter adjusts his worn canvas hat, a gift from his father-in-law on his first hunting trip to this region. The familiar weight of his rifle rests comfortably against his shoulder, an extension of himself after so many years. He pauses, inhaling deeply, sorting through the desert scents, juniper, sage, the mineral tang of sand and stone. Something feels different this morning. The desert, normally alive with the subtle sounds of small creatures going about their business, seems unnaturally quiet. The hunter's trained senses register the absence. No darting lizards, no distant call of a red-tailed hawk. Even the wind, which typically whispers through the canyon walls at this hour, holds its breath. He kneels, examining a set of tracks that don't belong to any wildlife he recognizes. Not coyote, not deer. The imprints suggest something heavier with an unnatural regularity to them. Human tracks, but not from standard hiking boots. Something different. Military perhaps, or specialized equipment. The hunter glances at the sky, noting the unusual cloud formation building on the western horizon. Not the typical afternoon thunderheads that gather in late summer, but something lower, darker. A weather front moving in unexpectedly. He makes a mental calculation. He has perhaps 4 hours before the system reaches this location. Rising, he adjusts his pack and continues his path toward a series of low bluffs he's never fully explored. In 17 years traversing this region, he's discovered there are always new pockets of terrain, hidden arroyos and unexpected formations that remain unmapped and unvisited. It's what keeps him coming back, the knowledge that no matter how familiar this landscape becomes, it always holds secrets. A jackrabbit darts suddenly from behind a scrub brush, startling in its frantic energy. The hunter freezes, watching its erratic path. The animal moves with unusual desperation, as if fleeing something rather than merely avoiding a human presence. His eyes narrow, tracking the direction from which the rabbit emerged. The radio on his belt crackles briefly with static before falling silent again. Cell service has always been non-existent in this remote section of the desert, but his emergency radio typically maintains a faint connection to the ranger station 20 miles east. The momentary burst of interference raises the hair on the back of his neck, a primal warning system honed through years in wilderness environments. The hunter changes course slightly, moving toward the area that spooked the jackrabbit. His steps become more deliberate, his awareness heightened. Years of tracking prey has taught him to trust these subtle disruptions in the natural order. Something has disturbed the delicate balance of this ecosystem. He crests a small rise, dropping into a natural depression hidden from the main trail. The ground here appears disturbed, not by animal activity, but by something else. Recent rainfall, unusual for this time of year, has created small rivulets that have carved away at the sandy soil, revealing something that doesn't belong in this ancient landscape. The hunter kneels again, running calloused fingers over exposed metal, dulled by time and the elements, but unmistakably manufactured. A corner of something larger, partially buried in the desert floor, revealed only because the recent unexpected storm washed away decades of accumulated sand and debris. The hunter's heart rate quickens as he brushes away more of the loose sand. What had appeared as just a metal corner reveals itself to be part of something much larger. His fingers work methodically, clearing away layer after layer of fine desert grit, exposing more of the object buried beneath. A safe, old and rusted, its once formidable exterior now corroded by years of exposure to the harsh desert elements. The heavy-duty hinges, though deteriorated, speak to its original purpose: security, protection, concealment. The hunter's breath catches in his throat as his mind races with possibilities. This isn't some recent disposal. The level of corrosion and the depth of burial suggest decades in this isolated spot. The safe appears to be roughly 3 feet by 2 feet, its surface marred by rust and the passage of time. What was once likely black or gray metal now displays a spectrum of oxidation: deep browns, flaking oranges, patches of residual paint clinging stubbornly to protected corners. The combination dial, once precise and functional, now sits frozen in place, its numbers barely legible beneath a crust of corrosion. The hunter sits back on his heels, heart pounding against his ribs. In 17 years of traversing this wilderness, he's found abandoned mining equipment, pieces of old settler wagons, even the occasional modern debris left by careless hikers. But nothing like this. Nothing so deliberately hidden, so obviously containing secrets meant to remain buried. His professional instincts take over, assessing the scene with the same methodical approach he uses when tracking elusive game. The placement isn't random. The safe rests in a natural depression, one that would normally be invisible from the surrounding trails and viewpoints. Only the recent unseasonable rainfall, washing away years of accumulated sand, had revealed its existence. The hunter reaches for his phone out of habit before remembering the absence of service. Instead, he pulls a small digital camera from his pack, an old habit from before smartphone days, one that has served him well in these remote areas. He documents the safe from multiple angles, carefully capturing its position relative to surrounding landmarks. The methodical documentation calms his racing thoughts, brings order to the unexpected discovery. He recalls a story from 3 years back, a local rancher who stumbled upon old Prohibition-era bottles near the Nevada border. Nothing came of it, just a minor feature in the local paper. But this feels different, more significant. The size and nature of the safe suggest contents of value or importance, deliberately hidden in one of the most remote sections of the desert. The hunter glances at his watch, then at the darkening clouds on the horizon. The incoming weather system has accelerated, perhaps 2 hours away now instead of 4. A decision forms in his mind. He needs to see what's inside before the storm hits, before darkness falls, before he's forced to leave this discovery unresolved. He examines the safe's condition more carefully. The lock mechanism, though corroded, might yield to the right tools. The hinges, more severely damaged by exposure, present a potential vulnerability. The metal itself, compromised by years of temperature extremes and occasional moisture, might be brittle enough to breach with sufficient force. The hunter runs his hands along the seam where the door meets the frame, feeling for weaknesses. His fingers encounter a spot where the metal has corroded more severely, creating a small gap. He retrieves a hunting knife from his belt, testing the edge against the compromised metal. It yields slightly, flakes of rust breaking away. Working methodically, he enlarges the gap, applying controlled pressure with the knife blade. The ancient metal protests, then surrenders in small increments. Minutes pass as he works, the silence of the desert broken only by the scrape of steel against corroded iron and his own measured breathing. A final push with the knife, leveraging the weakness in the hinge area, and the safe door shifts with an audible groan. The hunter pauses, his pulse throbbing in his ears. With deliberate movements, he positions himself and applies steady pressure to the compromised edge. The door yields further, ancient metal giving way after decades of resistance. And then it's open. The hunter holds his breath, leaning forward to peer into the darkness of the safe's interior. The musty smell of long enclosed space hits him first, a stale metallic odor tinged with something else he can't immediately identify. He retrieves a small flashlight from his pack, directing the beam into the shadowed interior. What the light reveals stops his heart momentarily. The contents of the safe lie before him, preserved in the dry desert air and protected from the elements by the rusted metal container. The hunter's flashlight beam illuminates stacks of documents, their edges yellowed with age but otherwise remarkably preserved. Beside them, several small cloth bags, cinched tightly closed. A metal box, smaller than a cigar box, rests atop the documents. And most surprisingly, a sealed glass jar containing what appears to be a thumb drive, technology far newer than the safe itself. The incongruity of finding modern digital storage in this decades-old container sends a chill down the hunter's spine. Someone had accessed this safe more recently, added to its contents, resealed it, left it in its hidden location. The hunter returns to his vehicle, parked 2 miles back at the end of a service road. He retrieves a small toolkit, a larger flashlight, and an empty backpack. The darkening sky and increasing wind remind him of his limited time window before the storm hits, adding urgency to his movements as he makes his way back to the site. Upon returning to the safe, he begins a more thorough examination, photographing each item before carefully removing it. The documents appear to be financial records, though without government or bank letterhead, private accounting perhaps. Dates visible on the top pages suggest they're from the mid-1980s. Names he doesn't recognize appear repeatedly throughout the pages, along with figures in the millions. The cloth bags, once opened, reveal small collectible coins, not standard currency, but commemorative pieces with distinctive markings that the hunter doesn't immediately recognize. Their weight suggests precious metal, though whether gold or another valuable alloy, he can't be certain. The small metal box contains a single key, old-fashioned and ornate, with no identifying marks or numbers. No indication of what lock it might open. The glass jar with the thumb drive proves most disturbing. It's sealed with wax, a deliberate preservation method that seems calculated to protect the digital device from the elements. A small paper label inside the jar bears a sequence of numbers and letters, possibly a password or access code. The hunter documents everything methodically, his training and experience with careful field observation serving him well in this unexpected situation. The storm clouds continue their approach, now visibly darkening the western sky. Thunder rumbles in the distance, adding an ominous soundtrack to his discovery. With each item cataloged and photographed, he makes the decision to take the contents with him. Whatever this represents, criminal evidence, forgotten history, abandoned secrets, it doesn't belong unprotected in the desert. He carefully transfers everything to his backpack, wrapping the more fragile documents in a spare waterproof jacket. As he secures the last items, the first heavy droplets of rain begin to fall. The hunter glances at the empty safe, considering whether to attempt to reseal it or leave it as is. The decision is made for him as the rain intensifies suddenly, a desert downpour that will soon turn the dry ground into flowing rivulets. He shoulders his pack and begins the return journey to his vehicle, moving quickly against the worsening conditions. 2 hours later, safely back at his modest home on the outskirts of a small town near the Utah-Arizona border, the hunter spreads the safe's contents across his kitchen table. The storm rages outside, but here, under the steady light of overhead fixtures, the mysterious item seems simultaneously more real and more out of place. He examines the documents more carefully, noting recurring references to locations across the Southwest, remote areas similar to where he found the safe. The financial figures are substantial, with transactions dating from 1983 through 1987, then abruptly stopping. No explanation for the cessation, just a sudden end to what appears to be a significant operation. The hunter connects his digital camera to his laptop, transferring the photographs he took at the site. The images confirm what he recalls. The safe had been deliberately placed, not randomly discarded. Its location, in a natural depression that would normally remain hidden from view, suggests intention rather than convenience. After careful consideration, he reaches for his phone and dials the county sheriff's office. The conversation is brief and unsatisfying. The bored-sounding deputy who takes his call seems uninterested in his discovery, suggesting he bring the items to the station whenever convenient for a report to be filed. No urgency, no recognition of potential significance. Found property gets logged all the time, the deputy explains with audible indifference. Bring it in Monday when Lieutenant Harkins is on shift. He handles all that paperwork. The hunter ends the call, staring at the items spread before him. Monday is 3 days away. His instincts tell him this matter deserves more immediate attention. The presence of the thumb drive particularly troubles him. Modern technology in an old safe suggests a connection to the present, not just some historical curiosity. He considers calling the Bureau of Land Management, since the discovery was made on what he believes to be federal land. But a quick check of the time, nearly 8 p.m. on a Friday, confirms the offices would be closed until Monday as well. The FBI field office in the nearest major city would likely direct him back to local authorities without compelling evidence of federal crimes. The hunter turns his attention to the thumb drive, sealed so carefully in its glass container. His laptop has a USB port, and the temptation to simply plug it in and see what it contains is powerful. But caution prevails. Unknown drives can contain malware. and whatever information this one holds was deemed important enough to hide in a remote desert location. He returns everything to his backpack, securing it in a locked cabinet in his home office. Sleep will be difficult tonight, he knows. The questions raised by his discovery will circle in his mind until he finds answers. As he prepares for bed, thunder still rolling across the desert beyond his windows, the hunter makes a decision. The bureaucratic response from local authorities doesn't satisfy him. Monday is too long to wait. Tomorrow, he'll begin his own investigation, starting with the names appearing most frequently in those financial documents. 17 years in this region have given him connections. Former game wardens now working in county records, drinking buddies with access to historical archives, a librarian who specializes in regional history, people who might recognize the names or help identify the commemorative coins. The hunter lies awake, replaying the discovery in his mind. The safe, hidden for decades. The documents detailing millions in transactions. The modern thumb drive sealed with such care. Whatever he stumbled upon feels significant, important enough that someone went to great lengths to conceal it in one of the most remote sections of the desert. And now, for better or worse, the secret belongs to him. The County Historical Archive occupies the basement of the small town's library, a modest brick building that dates back to the 1950s. Early morning sunlight streams through narrow ground-level windows, illuminating dancing dust particles and highlighting the institutional beige walls and metal shelving units that contain the region's documented past. The hunter arrives as soon as the doors open, nodding briefly to the elderly librarian who recognizes him from previous research trips, when he'd sought information on historical hunting grounds and land use changes. His backpack contains carefully selected items from the safe, photocopies of the documents rather than originals, photographs of the coins, and a written description of the thumb drive. The actual items remain secured in his home, distributed between his gun safe and a waterproof container buried beneath his tool shed. Research for a new hunting area? The librarian asks, her voice carrying the pleasant rasp of advancing years. Something like that, the hunter replies, maintaining the privacy that has become second nature after nearly 2 decades navigating the delicate relationships of small-town life. Looking into some historical land use in the western quadrant, the librarian directs him to the appropriate section, where county land records, mining claims, and development permits are stored in a combination of bound volumes and acid-free storage boxes. The older records remain exclusively on paper, the county's digitization efforts having stalled years ago due to budget constraints. For 3 hours, the hunter methodically works through the archives, focusing on the years surrounding the documents found in the safe, 1980 through 1990. The financial records had mentioned several locations, and he cross-references these with official county documents, searching for connections. In a folder labeled Abandoned Projects 1985-1989, he finds the first significant lead, a proposed development approximately 12 miles from where he discovered the safe, a research facility with vague descriptions of its intended purpose. The application for permits came from a corporation called Desert Innovations Research, a name that appeared repeatedly in the financial documents from the safe. The development plans show a substantial compound, a main building surrounded by smaller structures, with details about specialized ventilation systems and reinforced construction that seem excessive for standard research purposes. The permit application includes environmental impact statements that minimize the facility's footprint, claiming it would maintain the natural desert ecosystem while advancing critical technological research. What catches the hunter's attention is a notation in red ink on the final page. Project suspended pending federal investigation, 1987. No further details, no resolution documented. Just an abrupt end to what appears to have been a significant development, coinciding precisely with when the financial records from the safe ceased. Do you know anything about a research facility that was planned out in the western sector back in the 80s? He asks the librarian, showing her the permit application but keeping the connection to his found documents private. The librarian adjusts her glasses, studying the papers with professional interest. Desert Innovations? Yes, that caused quite a stir back then. Before my time at the library, but my late husband mentioned it occasionally. Very secretive operation. Rumors about government contracts, though nothing was ever confirmed publicly. She retrieves a bound volume of the local newspaper from 1987, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency through the yellowed pages. Here, she says, pointing to a small article buried on page 7 of the September issue. Not much reported, as I recall. The article is brief, just 3 paragraphs describing how construction on the Desert Innovations facility had been indefinitely suspended following regulatory concerns. No specifics, no named officials, no quotes from the company. The type of non-reporting that speaks volumes about information deliberately withheld. Was anything ever built out there? The hunter asks, his tone casual despite the quickening of his pulse. Foundations were poured, I believe. Some preliminary structures. Then, everything stopped. The librarian closes the volume carefully. The area was fenced off for years. No trespassing signs. Eventually, the county removed the markers from official maps. People forgot about it. The hunter photographs the permit documents and newspaper article with his phone, adding them to his growing collection of evidence. Any idea where exactly this facility was located? The permit application gives coordinates, but I wonder if there were any access roads documented. The librarian considers for a moment, then leads him to a cabinet containing survey maps from different decades. She selects a large folded map from 1986, spreading it carefully across a reading table. Here, she says, her finger resting on a location marked with a small square and labeled simply DIR. A thin line indicating an access road connects the site to a minor county highway. This road wouldn't appear on modern maps, probably reclaimed by the desert years ago. The hunter memorizes the location, noting its proximity to where he discovered the safe, close enough to suggest a connection, far enough that the connection wouldn't be immediately obvious. He thanks the librarian and continues his research, finding scattered references to Desert Innovations in other documents, tax assessments, utility installation requests, and a curious easement granted for specialized equipment transport across federal lands. By early afternoon, he has compiled enough information to justify a field investigation. The abandoned research facility, whatever its original purpose, clearly connects to the financial records found in the safe. The timing of its abrupt shutdown, 1987, aligns perfectly with when the documentation ended. The hunter gathers his materials, thanking the librarian for her assistance. Outside, he consults a modern topographical map on his phone, identifying the approximate location of the abandoned facility based on the historical documents. The area lies within a particularly remote section of the desert, beyond established trails and rarely visited even by experienced backcountry hikers. The hunter's weathered pickup truck navigates the increasingly rough terrain, following what was once an access road, but has now been largely reclaimed by the desert. Occasional remnants, a collapsed culvert, fragments of asphalt emerging from the sand like archaeological artifacts, confirm he's on the right path. 2 miles from where the road becomes completely impassable, he parks in the shadow of a mesa, concealing his vehicle from aerial observation, an old habit from hunting on disputed boundaries. The remaining distance will need to be covered on foot. The afternoon heat has begun to subside as he sets out. GPS coordinates programmed into his phone, a paper map as backup. His pack contains essential survival gear, documentation equipment, and a sidearm, standard for remote expeditions in territory known for illegal activities ranging from drug trafficking to undocumented border crossings. After 40 minutes of hiking through increasingly rugged terrain, the first signs of the abandoned facility come into view. A chain-link fence, partially collapsed and buried in places by wind-blown sand, creates an irregular perimeter around several concrete foundations. Warning signs, their red lettering faded to a barely legible pink, hang at irregular intervals. Restricted area, no unauthorized entry. The hunter carefully documents the perimeter, photographing the fence line, signs, and approach paths. Using a small pair of wire cutters from his pack, he creates an opening where the fence has already begun to separate from a support post, leaving minimal evidence of his entry. Inside the fence line, the abandoned facility reveals itself more fully. The main building's foundation forms a substantial concrete rectangle, approximately 200 feet by 100 feet, with smaller pad sites scattered around it. Metal anchor bolts protrude from the concrete like skeletal remains, rusted from decades of exposure. Several partial walls remain standing, reinforced concrete 18 inches thick, suggesting construction far more robust than standard research buildings would require. Most telling are the substructures, concrete stairwells leading below ground level, their entries now partially filled with sand and debris. The hunter shines his flashlight down the most accessible of these, revealing a corridor extending into darkness beyond the reach of his light beam. In what appears to have been an auxiliary building, he finds the remains of an electrical control room. Most equipment has been removed, but heavy conduit and mounting brackets suggest substantial power requirements. On the wall, a faded schematic shows the layout of the complete facility, more extensive than the visible foundations suggest, with significant underground components labeled as primary research areas and secure storage. The hunter photographs the schematic, adding it to his growing documentation. The scale of the abandoned project exceeds what was indicated in the permit applications he found in the county archives. Another discrepancy suggesting deliberate concealment of the facility's true purpose. As the sun approaches the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, he conducts a final perimeter check. In a depression behind what would have been the main structure, partially concealed by sand and scrub vegetation, he discovers a concrete pad with a heavy metal cover, an access point to something below ground that remains sealed despite the abandonment of the above-ground structures. The metal cover bears no identifying markings, just a simple numerical keypad with keys so weathered the numbers are barely visible. The hunter attempts to lift the cover, finding it securely locked despite decades of exposure to the elements. Unlike the rusted safe he discovered days earlier, this structure was designed for permanence, to secure whatever lies beneath, regardless of abandonment. The fading light forces him to conclude his initial survey. The hunter marks the location on his GPS, documents the sealed access point with multiple photographs, and begins the return journey to his vehicle. The abandoned facility has confirmed his suspicions. The safe and its contents connect to something substantial, something deliberately hidden, something that involved significant resources and then an abrupt termination. Dawn breaks over the desert with a clear sky promising another scorching day. The hunter returns to where he initially found the safe, now equipped with more advanced search tools, a metal detector borrowed from a friend who prospects for gold in the off-season, a collapsible shovel, and ground-penetrating radar attachment for his smartphone, a recent purchase for locating animal burrows that's about to serve a different purpose. The safe's location takes on new significance with the knowledge of the abandoned facility approximately 5 miles southwest. The hunter expands his search area, working in concentric circles from the original discovery point. The metal detector signals frequently, the desert floor containing random metallic debris accumulated over decades, but the hunter methodically investigates each potential find. 3 hours into the search, approximately 40 yards north of the safe's location, the detector gives a sustained, solid tone. The smartphone radar confirms a substantial metallic mass approximately 2 feet below the surface. The hunter begins carefully removing the sandy soil, revealing another rusted metal object. Not a safe this time, but what appears to be a storage container, approximately 4 feet long and 2 feet wide. Unlike the safe, this container has no obvious opening mechanism. Its seams are welded, designed for permanent sealing rather than repeated access. Using a battery-powered rotary tool, the hunter carefully cuts along one edge, creating an opening large enough to examine the contents. Inside, wrapped in deteriorating plastic sheeting, lie stacks of technical documents, blueprints, specifications, and what appear to be research notes. The paper has yellowed but remains legible, protected from moisture by the desert's arid conditions and the sealed container. The hunter carefully extracts the materials, laying them on a tarp to examine. The blueprints detail underground structures consistent with the foundations he observed at the abandoned facility, but with significantly more extensive subsurface elements than visible from above ground. Multiple levels, specialized chambers with unexplained purposes, and an elaborate ventilation system designed to filter both incoming and outgoing air. More troubling are the research notes, containing technical terminology beyond the hunter's knowledge, but with enough recognizable content to suggest advanced weapons development, references to enhanced payload delivery systems, and targeted physiological response mechanisms. The documents bear no official government markings, no classified stamps, nothing to suggest proper oversight of what clearly involved dangerous research. Most significant is a personnel roster, listing scientists and support staff by employee number rather than name, but including their specialties: microbiology, chemical engineering, neurological research. Disciplines that, when combined, point toward biological or chemical weapons development outside official channels. The hunter documents everything meticulously, creating digital backups of each page before carefully repacking the container and reburying it slightly deeper than he found it, marking the location on his GPS. The information discovered requires expert interpretation, something beyond his capabilities but potentially explosive if connected to the financial records from the safe. Continuing his expanded search, the hunter discovers two more significant items before the afternoon heat forces a pause. A buried cache of specialized laboratory equipment, corroded but recognizable, and most disturbing, a partial manifest listing test subjects by number rather than name, with cryptic notations about exposure levels and response variations. As he prepares to leave the site, the hunter notices something he missed during previous visits, a barely visible trail leading northwest from the safe's location. Not a human path, but a drainage pattern created by the occasional desert rainstorms, potentially revealing what lies in that direction. Following this natural feature for approximately a quarter mile, the hunter discovers a concrete structure partially buried in the sloping terrain, a bunker-like installation with a heavy metal door recessed into the hillside. Unlike the abandoned facility, this structure shows signs of more recent activity. The area around the door swept clear of sand, the hinges lightly oiled, a modern padlock securing the entrance. The hunter photographs the bunker from multiple angles, careful not to leave footprints or other evidence of his presence. The maintained condition of this installation contradicts the abandoned nature of the main facility, suggesting that whatever operation was officially suspended in 1987 might have continued in some capacity, away from public or regulatory scrutiny. Using a telephoto lens, he captures images of the padlock, a high-security model with no signs of weathering or age. Recent access, possibly within days or weeks. The hunter retreats to a vantage point on higher ground, settling in to observe the bunker through binoculars. Hours pass with no activity, but as the sun begins to set, his patience is rewarded. A vehicle appears on the horizon, a white SUV with no visible markings, approaching via an unmarked track different from the paths the hunter used. The SUV stops approximately 100 yards from the bunker, and two individuals emerge. Men in casual clothing but moving with the deliberate efficiency of professionals. They approach the bunker, unlock the padlock, and enter for approximately 20 minutes before emerging with a small metallic case. No conversation, no hesitation, just purposeful execution of what appears to be a routine collection. The hunter documents the entire sequence, capturing license plate details, physical descriptions, and precise timestamps. As the SUV departs, he makes a critical decision. This is no longer a curious historical discovery, but evidence of ongoing operations connected to what the safe's contents had begun to reveal. The hunter's kitchen table has transformed into an intelligence center, documents arranged in chronological order, photographs grouped by location, connections mapped with string, and push pins on a corkboard normally used for planning hunting expeditions. 3 laptops run simultaneously, one displaying mapping data, one processing enhanced images from his field photography, and the third secured behind multiple encryption layers containing the most sensitive findings. He has spent 2 days organizing the evidence, creating multiple backups stored in various locations. The USB drive from the safe remains isolated, connected only to a standalone computer with no internet access, a precaution against potential tracking software or destructive code. The drive's contents proved as disturbing as he feared. Financial records continuing beyond the 1987 shutdown, showing diverted funds, shell companies, and payments to individuals identified only by code names. Most concerning, recent entries dated just months ago, proving the operation never truly ceased but merely went deeper underground. The hunter rubs his tired eyes, glancing at the clock. Nearly midnight. His teenage daughter is staying with friends, the house silent except for the occasional creak of settling timbers. The isolation that normally brings comfort now feels vulnerable, exposed. A soft sound from the front porch, too deliberate for wind, too subtle for a casual visitor. The hunter instinctively kills the kitchen lights, moving silently to retrieve his sidearm from its secured location. Years of hunting have honed his ability to move without sound, to sense disturbances in his environment. Through a narrow gap in the blinds, he observes the porch. Empty, but a white envelope has been placed precisely centered on the welcome mat. No delivery vehicle in sight, no retreating figure, just the envelope glowing faintly in the moonlight. 20 minutes of patient observation confirms no immediate threat remains. The hunter retrieves the envelope using gloves, careful not to contaminate potential evidence. Inside, a single sheet of paper contains a typed message, clinical in its simplicity. The materials you removed from federal land are government property. Return all items to their original locations within 48 hours. This is your only warning. Further interference will be addressed as a matter of national security. No signature, no contact information, nothing to indicate official capacity. The hunter photographs the note, then places it in a plastic evidence bag. The threat confirms his suspicions. Whatever he's discovered remains active, and those involved are aware of his actions. They've identified him, located his home, delivered a message without being detected. The county sheriff's office occupies a single-story building adjacent to the local courthouse, its beige stucco exterior and barred windows projecting modest authority, appropriate to a rural jurisdiction with limited resources. The hunter enters carrying a sealed envelope containing select evidence, nothing that reveals the full scope of his discoveries, but enough to justify official involvement. Photographs of the abandoned facility, documentation of the bunker with recent activity, and the threatening note. The front desk deputy, different from the disinterested voice on the phone days earlier, directs him to a small interview room. After 15 minutes, a senior deputy enters, late 50s, with the hardened demeanor of someone who's spent decades navigating the complex politics of small-town law enforcement. "I understand you found something out in the western sector," the senior deputy begins, his tone professional but guarded. The hunter explains his discovery of the safe, the abandoned research facility, and the recently accessed bunker, presenting his carefully curated evidence. He describes the threatening note but omits details about the full contents of the safe and the buried document cache, testing the waters before revealing everything. The senior deputy reviews the materials with practiced indifference, his expression revealing nothing. "Deserts full of abandoned projects," he comments, sliding the photographs back across the table. "Military testing, mining operations, private research. Nothing unusual." "The threatening note doesn't concern you?" the hunter asks, maintaining his composure despite the dismissal. "Folks get territorial about their land, even when it isn't legally theirs. Probably someone with an unregistered mining claim thinking you're encroaching." The senior deputy stands, indicating the interview has concluded. "File a report if you want, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Stay away from that area, and they'll stay away from you." The response is too practiced, too dismissive given the evidence presented. The hunter recognizes the signs of someone following a script rather than pursuing legitimate inquiry. His suspicions deepen. Whatever operation continues in the desert has influence extending to local law enforcement, ensuring interference is minimized. As the hunter prepares to leave, a younger deputy, early 30s, newer uniform, less weathered demeanor, makes brief eye contact, a subtle head tilt indicating the hallway. Outside the building, as the hunter approaches his vehicle, the young deputy appears, ostensibly checking parking meters. "You're not the first," the young deputy says quietly, maintaining the pretense of official duties. 3 years ago, a geological survey team reported unusual structures in that same area. Their findings were redirected to a federal task force. They never heard anything further. The hunter remains silent, allowing the deputy to continue. "The senior staff has standing orders regarding that western quadrant. Reports get filed in special categories, never digitized, eventually lost in records transfers." The young deputy glances toward the building. "Whatever's out there, it has protection from levels way above our pay grade." "Any suggestion who I should talk to?" the hunter asks, careful to maintain the casual appearance of their interaction. "Not local, that's for sure. Federal jurisdiction is murky. BLM claims it's Defense Department land. Defense says it's Department of Energy. Energy says it's private property with government easements." The young deputy finishes checking the meters. "There's a journalist who's been looking into land use discrepancies across the Southwest. Regional investigations, podcast called Desert Secrets. Might be worth a conversation." The hunter nods, expressing gratitude with a subtle gesture. The young deputy returns to the building, their brief interaction unremarkable to any observers. Returning to his vehicle after purchasing supplies in town, the hunter immediately notices the intrusion, subtle but unmistakable to someone who has spent decades observing details. The seat position shifted slightly, the rearview mirror angle changed, the console items rearranged with millimeter precision that falls just short of perfect replication. A thorough inspection reveals the true purpose. His spare key fob has been handled, the GPS unit accessed, a tracking device smaller than a postage stamp attached beneath the dashboard. The hunter leaves these modifications intact, providing no indication he's detected them. Instead, he activates a privacy screen on his phone and searches for information on the podcast mentioned by the young deputy. Desert Secrets appears legitimate. 3 seasons of investigative journalism focusing on land use issues, environmental concerns, and government secrecy across the American Southwest. The host, identified only as regional investigative journalist in public materials, has credentials with several respected news organizations and a history of exposing corporate malfeasance and regulatory capture. The hunter composes a carefully worded email, requesting a secure communication channel to discuss significant findings related to unauthorized activities on federal lands. He sends it through an anonymous remailer, providing no identifying details but including a single photograph of the safe, enough to establish credibility without revealing the extent of his discoveries. Returning home, he discovers a second envelope, this one placed on his kitchen table inside the locked house. The boundary violation sends adrenaline coursing through his system. The message inside is more explicit. Final warning: you've been monitored since the initial discovery. Your communications are intercepted. Your evidence has been compromised. Cease all investigation immediately. The next intervention will not be limited to written notices. Accompanying the note is a photograph of his teenage daughter at her friend's house, taken within the past hour. A clear escalation from warning to threat, from professional discouragement to personal intimidation. The hunter's resolve hardens. Whatever he's stumbled upon reaches beyond abandoned historical projects into active, current operations with resources, and reach beyond what legitimate government activities would employ against a civilian. The willingness to threaten a minor confirms his suspicions about the ethical boundaries, or lack thereof, of those involved. Working methodically through the night, he implements his contingency plan. All digital evidence transferred to encrypted drives, copies sent to secure cloud storage under accounts not connected to his identity, physical documents photographed, originals hidden in waterproof containers at 3 separate locations, known only to him, a comprehensive summary of all findings, with coordinates, timestamps, and connections, sealed and addressed to the State Attorney General, with instructions for delivery in the event he doesn't check in within specified time frames, a go-bag packed with essential survival gear, emergency funds, and communication equipment not linked to his known accounts. By dawn, the hunter has completed preparations for whatever comes next. The email program on his phone chimes with a notification, a response from the podcast host, agreeing to a secure meeting at a public location 2 hours' drive from the hunter's home. The investigation has moved beyond curiosity or civic duty into something more personal, a threat to his family, a challenge to his territory. The hunter has spent his life reading signs, tracking elusive prey, understanding patterns invisible to casual observers. Now those skills will serve a different purpose, uncovering whatever operation continues in the desert and exposing those willing to threaten a child to protect their secrets. He secures his home, sends a message to his daughter to remain with friends for a few more days, and loads his truck for what may be an extended absence. Whatever lies ahead, the hunter has crossed a threshold from which there is no returning to his previous life. The safe found in the desert has set in motion events that will either expose long-hidden truths or bury them, and possibly him, even deeper. The hunter moves through his darkened home with practiced efficiency, guided by familiarity rather than light. The digital clock on the microwave reads 4:17 a.m., a time when even the desert's nocturnal predators have retired, when human surveillance is most likely to falter. Each step is deliberate, each action calculated to leave minimal evidence of his preparations. On the kitchen table lies a sealed envelope addressed to his former brother-in-law, a state prosecutor in the neighboring county, a man whose integrity remains uncompromised despite opportunities for corruption. Inside, detailed instructions on accessing the secured evidence should the hunter fail to make his scheduled check-ins over the next 72 hours. Not everything, but enough to initiate an official investigation beyond local jurisdiction. The hunter activates a digital voice recorder speaking in measured tones. This statement is made voluntarily on October 15, 2025. I am of sound mind and under no duress except the threats documented in previous recordings. What follows is a complete account of my discoveries relating to the abandoned Desert Innovations Research Facility and the active operations continuing at the adjacent bunker installation. For 22 minutes, he details everything: the safe and its contents, the abandoned facility, the document cache, the active bunker, the threatening messages, the photograph of his daughter, names, dates, coordinates, connections between financial records and observed activities. The recording concludes with, "I have arranged multiple secure copies of all evidence. Any harm to me or my family will trigger automatic distribution to federal authorities, international press agencies, and secure digital platforms beyond the reach of domestic interference. This is not a threat, but a fail-safe to ensure the truth emerges, regardless of my personal safety." The recording is encrypted, copied to 3 separate devices, and scheduled for automatic upload to secure servers if not canceled within specified time frames. One copy, on a specialized voice recorder disguised as a key fob, will remain with him at all times. The hunter checks his equipment one final time: high-resolution camera with night vision capabilities, digital binoculars with recording function GPS unit, not connected to any network satellite phone registered under a business associate's information. 2 burner phones purchased 6 months earlier for a hunting expedition. Portable solar charger for extended field operations. 3 days of concentrated rations. Water purification system. Basic medical supplies. Lightweight ghillie suit for dessert. Terrain sidearm with spare ammunition. Each item selected for reliability under adverse conditions. For functionality without dependence on external networks. For survivability if pursuits extend beyond expected parameters. The hunter places a final call to his cousin, a wilderness guide operating in the mountains 4 hours north. A man whose existence remains undocumented in the hunter's digital life, whose connection predates surveillance technologies. "Need you to check on the northern property this weekend," the hunter says, using their established code for emergency protocols. "The teenager will contact you for that fishing trip we discussed. Make sure she brings the equipment we prepared last summer." The code, developed years earlier for potential wilderness emergencies, now serves a different purpose: ensuring his daughter transitions to the protective custody of family with no traceable connections to his current location or activities. A quick glance at the surveillance camera feed shows no vehicles on the approaching road, no unusual heat signatures in the surrounding desert. The hunter does one final sweep of his home, removing trace evidence of his preparations, deliberately leaving misleading indicators of intended destinations. The tracking device on his truck remains untouched. It will follow a convincing decoy route before being disabled. In his garage, concealed beneath seasonal equipment, waits the vehicle unknown to those monitoring him. An unremarkable 15-year-old SUV registered to a hunting LLC formed a decade earlier, its maintenance records showing no activity for 18 months. Its fuel tank is full, its essential fluids recently replaced, its interior stocked with supplies requiring no stops for at least 300 miles. The hunter locks his home, activating security systems that will record any intrusions. As he drives away under the fading stars, his expression remains neutral, his posture relaxed, presenting the appearance of a routine early morning departure for anyone observing. Only the tightness in his jaw betrays the tension of a man who understands he has set in motion events that cannot be undone. The hunter parks his vehicle in a shallow ravine 3 miles from the active bunker installation, camouflaging it with a desert-patterned tarp that renders it nearly invisible from air surveillance. The fading daylight provides optimal conditions for his approach, enough visibility to navigate the difficult terrain, enough shadows to conceal his movements from distant observation. He wears desert camouflage appropriate for the transition from day to night, his pack containing only essential documentation equipment and emergency supplies. 17 years navigating this landscape have taught him to read the desert's subtle language. Game trails that offer silent passage, areas where rocky ground leaves no footprints, approaches shielded from typical observation points. For 90 minutes, he advances methodically toward the bunker installation, using natural features for concealment, freezing into immobility when surveillance drones pass overhead. Their presence confirms his suspicions. Whatever continues here has sophisticated security, resources beyond typical private operations. As darkness solidifies, the hunter reaches an observation point approximately 200 yards from the bunker entrance, positioning himself in a natural depression that offers concealment while providing clear sightlines to the installation. Through his night vision equipment, he observes activity that contradicts the abandoned appearance visible in daylight. Two unmarked vehicles are parked near the bunker entrance. The white SUV he observed previously, and a larger transport truck with specialized cargo capacity. 4 individuals move between the vehicles and the bunker, transferring sealed containers with the practiced efficiency of routine operations. Unlike the previous observation, tonight's activity suggests a significant transfer, perhaps final extraction of materials, perhaps preparation for expanded operations. The hunter documents everything: vehicle details, container markings, the systematic process of loading. When one container is momentarily placed on the ground, its identification becomes briefly visible. Biologic materials, containment protocol alpha. The clinical designation sends a chill through his system despite years of exposure to harsh environments. After an hour of observation and documentation, the hunter makes a calculated decision to advance closer. The transport operation provides both increased risk of discovery and unique opportunity for more substantial evidence. Using a dry creek bed that approaches within 50 yards of the bunker entrance, he works his way forward with the patient stillness developed through countless hunting expeditions. At the closest approach point, concealed behind a natural berm, the hunter witnesses what the financial records, buried documents, and threatening notes had only suggested. Through the bunker's open door, clearly visible under temporary lighting, stands a modern laboratory facility, stainless steel equipment, computer workstations, and most significantly, a series of containment units bearing biohazard symbols. Technicians in partial protective gear transfer materials from these units to specialized transport containers, their movements suggesting containment protocols rather than standard handling procedures. Most disturbing, a wall of digital monitors displaying what appear to be medical data, vital signs, test results, progression charts. The implication solidifies in the hunter's mind. This isn't historical weapons research, but ongoing biological testing, potentially involving human subjects, conducted outside regulatory oversight, hidden in one of the nation's most remote locations. The hunter documents everything, his camera's telephoto lens capturing detailed images of equipment, container markings, computer screens, and personnel. He activates the recording function on his disguised voice recorder, narrating observations in barely audible whispers, creating real-time documentation to supplement the visual evidence. As the loading operation nears completion, the hunter begins a controlled withdrawal, planning to circle around to a secondary observation point to document the vehicle's departure. 3 yards into his retreat, a security sensor he failed to detect activates, a pinpoint of red light accompanied by a barely audible alert tone. Within seconds, handheld spotlights sweep the perimeter, voices call out commands, and the methodical operation transforms into heightened security response. The hunter freezes momentarily, then implements emergency protocols, creating distance while minimizing visible movement, using terrain features for concealment, leaving no direct path to his position. Motion detection sector 7. A voice calls out, professional rather than alarmed. Sweep pattern alpha, possible wildlife intrusion. The response suggests routine security rather than specific awareness of his presence, a protocol for any perimeter breach rather than targeted pursuit. The hunter uses this to his advantage, moving laterally rather than directly away, using a technique developed for evading prey with keen senses. Become part of the landscape's natural movement patterns rather than introducing disruption. The security team advances with systematic efficiency, their handheld thermal imaging devices scanning the terrain in overlapping patterns. The hunter's desert camouflage offers limited protection against such technology, forcing him to use terrain features that mask heat signatures, limestone outcroppings, dense brush with established heat profiles, areas where residual day warmth creates confusing thermal backgrounds. For 20 minutes, the hunter navigates the invisible boundary between escape and discovery, using every technique developed through decades in wilderness environments. His heart rate remains controlled, his breathing measured, his movements calculated between security team rotations. When a searcher passes within 10 yards of his position, the hunter remains motionless despite exposed vulnerability, understanding that movement would trigger immediate detection. The security perimeter expands methodically, threatening to encircle his position. The hunter recognizes the protocol from military training exercises he observed years earlier. Standard containment approach for unknown threats, designed to limit escape options while minimizing personnel exposure. In a calculated risk, He creates a distraction, activating a small electronic device that emits the heat signature and movement pattern of a medium-sized animal, placing it in brush 30 yards from his position before retreating in the opposite direction. The security team's focus shifts predictably toward the decoy, their thermal equipment registering the artificial signature as a potential target. Coyote in Sector 9. A voice reports over radio. Continuing perimeter sweep. The identification of wildlife rather than human intrusion reduces the security response intensity, creating the opportunity the hunter requires. As the search pattern shifts, he executes a controlled withdrawal, using the blind spot created by the distraction, moving rapidly when searchers' attention focuses elsewhere, freezing into immobility when observation risks increase. For 45 minutes, this calculated retreat continues, progress measured in yards rather than miles, success determined by remaining undetected rather than distance covered. Eventually, the security response diminishes, the searchers returning to their primary mission of completing the transport operation, the perimeter sweep contracting to standard parameters. The hunter reaches the ridgeline that marks effective withdrawal, beyond thermal imaging range, beyond standard security patrol boundaries. His breathing remains controlled despite physical exertion, his movements precise despite accelerated timeline. Rather than return directly to his concealed vehicle, he circles to a secondary observation point, documenting the departure of both vehicles, the white SUV leading, the transport truck following, their headlights cutting through desert darkness as they move toward the unmarked access road that connects to county highway systems. Only when the vehicles have disappeared beyond the horizon does the hunter begin the final phase of extraction, moving rapidly across terrain now familiar in darkness, his route designed to leave minimal evidence of passage. 3 hours after triggering the security sensor, he reaches his concealed vehicle, performs a thorough inspection for tracking devices or tampering, and executes the next phase of his plan. The digital evidence, hundreds of high-resolution images, video recordings, audio narration, is encrypted and transmitted via satellite connection to secure storage, creating backups beyond physical reach. Only then does he permit himself the luxury of acknowledging physical strain, hands slightly tremulous from sustained adrenaline, muscles aching from extended periods of unnatural stillness, mind processing the implications of what he's witnessed. Whatever operates in that desert installation involves biological agents potentially affecting human subjects, conducted without oversight, protected by private security with military-grade equipment and protocols. The scale exceeds criminal enterprise, suggesting institutional support while avoiding official documentation. The financial records from the safe show decades of operation despite supposed termination, millions in untraceable funds, connections to shell companies across multiple jurisdictions. The hunter starts his vehicle, navigating without headlights until reaching the established road network. The meeting with the investigative journalist remains scheduled for tomorrow morning, a critical transfer of evidence that must occur regardless of increased risk. Whatever surveillance targeted him previously will intensify following the security breach, requiring additional countermeasures for the final approach. As his vehicle merges onto the interstate highway, anonymous among late-night travelers, the hunter permits himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Despite professional security, despite sophisticated surveillance, despite resources far exceeding his own, he has accomplished the essential mission, documenting irrefutable evidence of operations that, once exposed, will indeed shock the nation. The roadside diner sits at the intersection of two state highways, its dated architecture and neon signage suggesting decades of continuous operation. The parking lot contains a predictable mix of long-haul trucks, local vehicles, and tourist rentals, the perfect anonymity of transitional space where strangers naturally converge without arousing suspicion. The hunter arrives 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting, performing standard counter-surveillance protocols, parking with clear exit routes, observing approaching vehicles, identifying potential observation points. Inside, he selects a booth offering visibility of both the entrance and the parking area, positioning himself with back-to-wall, unobstructed sight lines, proximity to secondary exit. The breakfast crowd provides optimal security, enough activity to complicate surveillance, enough noise to mask conversation, enough strangers to obscure specific targeting. The hunter orders coffee and a standard breakfast, establishing the appearance of routine traveler behavior, while maintaining awareness of every individual entering the establishment. At precisely the arranged time, The investigative journalist arrives. Mid-40s, business casual attire suggesting professional function without specific identity, carrying a laptop bag and nothing else. The journalist makes no obvious surveillance checks, maintains no suspicious awareness, simply enters and scans for the arranged meeting identifier, a specific hunting magazine placed visibly on the table. Upon identifying the hunter, the journalist approaches directly, sliding into the opposite side of the booth with practiced casualness. No introductions, no handshakes, nothing to suggest prearranged meeting rather than chance encounter. "Weather's supposed to clear by afternoon," the journalist offers, the innocuous statement serving as arranged authentication. "Better for eastbound travel than west," the hunter responds, completing the verification sequence. With identities confirmed, the conversation shifts immediately to substance. The hunter provides a condensed briefing, discovery of the safe, contents indicating financial operations continuing beyond official termination, abandoned research facility with evidence of biological weapons development, active bunker installation with ongoing operations involving hazardous biological materials. The journalist's expression remains professionally neutral despite the escalating gravity of information, years of investigating corporate malfeasance and government secrecy, having calibrated reactions to contain visible response. Only slight pupil dilation and minimal shift in breathing pattern betray genuine shock at the scale and implications of the evidence being described. "You have documentation?" the journalist asks, the question focused on professional requirements rather than personal doubt. The hunter places a specialized data drive on the table, one of 7 identical copies created before leaving his home, each containing complete evidence packages with encryption requiring specific access protocols. Everything's here: financial records, facility documents, personnel rosters, test subject listings, photographic evidence of current operations. Access instructions are included in a separate communication sent to your secure channel. The same package has been distributed to 5 additional recipients who will release it publicly if authentication protocols aren't maintained. The journalist secures the drive without examining it, understanding the security implications of displaying such evidence in public space. Distribution plan: simultaneous release through multiple channels, national news organizations, congressional oversight committees, international monitoring agencies, and public digital platforms. Coordinated publication at noon Eastern Time tomorrow, giving your organization exclusive first documentation while ensuring no single point of suppression. The journalist nods. Professional assessment calculating optimal approach. The biological testing angle requires specialized verification. "I have contacts at the CDC and Fort Detrick who can authenticate without compromising security." "Already arranged," the hunter responds. "Medical assessment team receiving independent documentation package this morning. Their verification will arrive before your publication window." The conversation continues for 17 minutes, covering technical details of evidence handling, publication sequences, security protocols for both individuals, until public revelation creates some measure of protection through visibility. No personal information exchanged, no unnecessary contextual details, nothing that compromises operational security of final exposure phase. As they prepare to conclude the meeting, the journalist offers a single personal observation. "Most whistleblowers I've worked with have institutional connections, insiders exposing systems they've helped maintain. You stumbled into this accidentally and still assembled a case more comprehensive than most federal investigations achieve in years." "I've spent my life reading signs others miss," the hunter replies, "tracking what doesn't want to be found. This was just a different kind of hunt." They depart separately, the journalist leaving first with secured evidence, the hunter remaining to maintain separation protocols. The next 24 hours will determine whether decades of hidden operations will finally face public accountability, whether the threats against his family will escalate or dissipate in the face of impending exposure. The hunter sits on the edge of a bed in a nondescript motel room 50 miles from the diner where the evidence transfer occurred. 3 laptops arranged before him display different news channels, their audio muted, closed captioning scrolling across the screens. His satellite phone rests beside them, secured communication channel open to receive confirmation of coordinated release. At precisely noon Eastern Time, the screens transform simultaneously, breaking news banners appearing across all networks, anchors' expressions conveying professional gravity tinged with genuine shock. The headlines materialize in variation but unified substance. Breaking: secret biological weapons testing facility discovered in Utah desert. Exclusive: decades of illegal biological research exposed by Hunter's accidental discovery. Whistleblower reveals underground bioweapons program operating since 1980s. The satellite phone vibrates with confirmation message. Publication complete. All channels live. Evidence packages delivered to oversight authorities. Protection protocols activated. The hunter watches as the story unfolds across media platforms. Carefully selected evidence photographs appearing on screens. Reporters providing initial details with appropriate caution. Experts being assembled to analyze implications. His 17 years of experience reading public lands, tracking elusive targets, and documenting wilderness patterns have culminated in this moment of revelation. On one screen, aerial footage shows federal agents surrounding the bunker installation, official vehicles creating a security perimeter, hazardous materials teams preparing for entry protocols. The operation that maintained secrecy for decades through rural isolation now exposed under helicopter camera feeds broadcasting to national audiences. The hunter switches to secure browser channels, confirming digital distribution across platforms immune to institutional suppression. The evidence now replicated across thousands of servers in multiple jurisdictions, beyond reach of any single authority's containment efforts. The truth, once fully released, developing its own momentum beyond control of those who maintained secrecy for decades. Congressional leaders announce emergency oversight hearings. The Pentagon issues carefully worded statements neither confirming nor denying prior knowledge. Health authorities implement precautionary monitoring of the region surrounding the facility. International regulatory bodies demand inspection access under biological weapons conventions. The hunter's satellite phone receives a second message, confirmation from his cousin that his daughter has arrived safely at the northern property, security protocols implemented, family protection established. Whatever institutional response follows, whatever individuals behind the operation might attempt, the primary vulnerability has been addressed. He allows himself a moment of genuine relief, the first since discovering the safe in the desert nearly 2 weeks earlier. The evidence is public, the operation exposed, accountability processes initiated. Professional instinct suggests certain details will remain classified. Certain individuals will evade justice through institutional protection, but the core objective has been achieved. The truth can no longer be buried in desert sand. The hunter stands at a remote overlook 5 miles from the facility, observing through high-powered binoculars as the federal operation continues into its second day. The scene below resembles a self-contained city erected in desert isolation. Command centers, decontamination units, evidence processing stations, security perimeters extending beyond any boundaries he'd previously documented. The scale confirms his suspicions about the significance of what lay hidden beneath unassuming desert terrain. Dozens of federal vehicles, hundreds of personnel, equipment suggesting expectations of significant findings rather than precautionary response. Whatever operated within that bunker warranted the most comprehensive federal seizure protocol implemented on domestic soil in recent decades. The hunter lowers the binoculars, gaze shifting to the western horizon where sunset transforms the desert landscape into the familiar palette that first drew him to this region 17 years earlier. The timing seems appropriate, one cycle closing as another begins, natural order asserting itself as human deceptions face exposure. He considers the sequence of events that led to this moment, an accidental discovery while pursuing normal patterns, followed by methodical investigation, escalating risk, and ultimately, revelation that will reshape understanding of what occurred in these remote territories. A lifetime developing skills for one purpose, serving an entirely different function when circumstances demanded adaptation. The hunter secures his equipment and begins the hike back to his concealed vehicle, moving with the same careful precision that has defined his relationship with this desert for nearly 2 decades. Tomorrow he will begin the process of reclaiming normal life, reuniting with his daughter, implementing security measures for their continued protection, establishing monitoring protocols to ensure the exposure maintains momentum rather than disappearing into classified containment. For now, however, he simply navigates familiar terrain with professional competence, his expression betraying none of the complex emotions accompanying completion of the most significant hunt he has ever undertaken. The desert keeps its remaining secrets, as it always has, but the most dangerous ones now face the disinfecting light of public scrutiny. All because someone who learned to read the land's subtle language happened upon a rusted safe that those who buried it never expected to be found. 3 weeks after the initial exposure, the Federal Courthouse Plaza hosts a formal press conference. A temporary stage bears the seals of multiple agencies: FBI, CDC, Department of Justice, Homeland Security. The assembled media presence suggests significance beyond regional interest: national networks, international correspondents, specialized medical journalists. The hunter observes from the periphery, positioned where institutional cameras won't easily capture his presence. His appearance has subtly altered: shorter hair, different eyewear, clothing that presents as urban professional rather than wilderness specialist. Not disguise precisely, but adaptation to changed circumstances. The federal prosecutor approaches the podium, flanked by agency directors whose grave expressions telegraph the severity of findings before any words are spoken. The prosecutor, late 50s, the weathered competence of someone who has navigated complex cases for decades, adjusts the microphone and addresses the assembled press with measured precision. After 3 weeks of intensive investigation involving 7 federal agencies and international oversight organizations, we can now confirm the preliminary findings regarding the Desert Innovations Research Facility. Cameras click in rapid succession, recording what will become defining images of the case. The operation discovered in the western Utah desert represented one of the most significant violations of biological weapons conventions, human research protocols, and federal law in our nation's history. The prosecutor outlines the scale with clinical detachment that somehow magnifies rather than diminishes the horror. Operational since 1983, the facility conducted prohibited biological agent development under the guise of private medical research. Financial documentation reveals approximately $1.7 billion in funding through a complex network of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and diverted government contracts. The hunter listens as official confirmation validates what the safe's contents first suggested: decades of operation, sophisticated financial concealment, institutional complexity beyond individual criminal enterprise. Most disturbing, the facility conducted non-consensual human testing over a 30-year period. To date, we have identified 173 victims, primarily individuals from vulnerable populations: unhoused persons, undocumented immigrants, individuals with mental illness, and those without family connections that might prompt investigation into their disappearances. The clinical description fails to capture what the hunter saw documented in the files: systematic exploitation of those society had already forgotten, their suffering recorded with scientific precision, their humanity reduced to data points in experimental protocols. 48 individuals have been arrested in connection with this operation, including research personnel, security staff, financial facilitators, and public officials who provided protection through obstruction of previous investigations. Additional indictments are expected as the investigation continues. The prosecutor continues with methodical detail: charges filed, international protocols invoked, oversight mechanisms implemented to prevent similar operations. The hunter notes which details remain conspicuously absent: connections to specific government agencies, names of high-level facilitators, the ultimate purpose of research that violated every established ethical boundary. As the formal presentation concludes and transitions to questions, the hunter observes subtle indicators of institutional damage control. Certain reporters called upon while others remain conspicuously ignored. Questions about specific government connections deflected with references to ongoing investigation. Emphasis placed on rogue operation narrative rather than systemic failures that permitted 3 decades of undetected activity. The press conference transitions to agency specialists detailing specific aspects of the case. The CDC representative outlines the biological agents developed: engineered pathogens designed for targeted demographic impact, specialized delivery systems optimized for urban environments, testing protocols that documented transmission rates with mathematical precision. The clinical language barely masks the underlying horror: weapons designed to maximize civilian casualties while maintaining deniability. The FBI section chief describes the operational security that maintained the facility's secrecy: compromised local officials, sophisticated surveillance countermeasures, psychological operations against potential witnesses that included targeted intimidation and strategic disinformation. Again, the hunter notes calculated omissions: no mention of which specific agencies might have provided technical support, no explanation of how regulatory inspections were consistently avoided, no acknowledgement of the institutional blind spots that enabled decades of operation. A Department of Justice representative details the ongoing efforts to identify victims, provide support for survivors, and establish accountability mechanisms. The Hunter recognizes the genuine commitment of the frontline investigators, their expressions betraying personal investment beyond professional obligation, while simultaneously observing how higher administrative layers shape the narrative toward containable conclusions rather than systemic implications. As the press conference concludes, the Hunter's attention shifts to impacts beyond the institutional response. Local residents gather at the plaza perimeter, their expressions reflecting complicated emotions: shock at discovering such operations within their community, anger at authorities who failed to detect or prevent the activities, relief that exposure has finally occurred. National news coverage displays similar reaction patterns across diverse communities, the universal human response to confirmation that trusted systems harbor deadly secrets. International implications materialize in real time. Allied nations demanding accountability for potential treaty violations, global health organizations implementing monitoring protocols for technologies similar to those developed in the facility, diplomatic communications referencing review of bilateral security agreements. Whatever operated in that desert installation has triggered cascading consequences beyond national boundaries. The Hunter observes a final telling detail as officials depart the stage: the subtle security presence surrounding key agency directors, the protective formation suggesting concerns beyond standard protocols. Whatever power enabled decades of prohibited research hasn't been fully neutralized by public exposure. Some participants remain sufficiently positioned to present ongoing security considerations, even for federal officials operating under public scrutiny. As the plaza gradually empties, the Hunter makes his own unobtrusive departure, moving through back streets toward his temporary accommodation. Tomorrow's congressional hearing will provide additional confirmation of what the rusted safe first revealed: institutional failures, deliberate concealment, exploitation of regulatory gaps that permitted unconscionable activities to continue undisturbed for decades. The Hunter's accidental discovery has initiated accountability processes that will continue long after his direct involvement concludes. The state governor's private office presents studied governmental gravitas: substantial wooden desk positioned before state and national flags, walls displaying historical photographs of regional development, shelves holding bound volumes of state code and regional reference materials. The formal surroundings contrast with the intentionally modest ceremony about to occur. The Hunter sits across from the governor, a career politician in her second term, known for pragmatic centrism and institutional competence rather than ideological positioning. Also present, the state attorney general, a federal prosecutor assigned to the case, and a victim's advocate representing those impacted by the desert facility's operations. The traditional approach would involve a public ceremony, the governor explains, formal commendation, press coverage, the standard recognition protocols. The Hunter nods without commenting, his preference for private acknowledgement having been communicated through intermediaries during preliminary discussions. However, the governor continues, "We're respecting your request for discretion given the sensitive nature of ongoing investigations and potential security considerations." The federal prosecutor adds context. Several key suspects remain at large, including individuals with significant resources and institutional connections. Your continued low profile serves both investigative integrity and personal security interests. The Hunter appreciates the professionalism. No platitudes about protection capabilities, no false assurances about neutralized threats, just honest acknowledgement of continuing risks inherent in exposing operations with powerful backers. The governor removes an envelope from her desk drawer. This formal commendation recognizes your extraordinary service to the state and nation. The document contains no identifying information beyond your professional role as requested. A more detailed record remains secured in classified files for potential future acknowledgement when circumstances permit. The Hunter accepts the envelope with a brief nod, placing it in his jacket pocket without examination. The recognition itself holds minimal personal significance. Institutional validation neither required nor particularly valued after witnessing how thoroughly those same institutions failed to prevent what occurred in the desert facility. The victim's advocate speaks next, her voice carrying the weight of representing those who cannot be present. "I've been asked to convey appreciation from survivors and families of victims who've been identified thus far. Your actions have provided answers to people who spent decades wondering what happened to their loved ones. That closure, however painful, represents significant healing for communities that had been systematically ignored." This acknowledgement resonates more deeply with the hunter, his expression softening slightly. The human impact, providing answers for those who suffered most directly, represents the only meaningful measure of his accidental involvement. The investigation continues identifying victims. The advocate continues, establishing support services and developing long-term accountability mechanisms. Many families have expressed desire to thank you personally when security considerations permit. The hunter responds with his first substantive comment of the meeting. "My role was accidental. The real recognition belongs to victims who survived and families who never stopped searching. They persisted against institutional indifference that nearly buried the truth permanently." The federal prosecutor nods with professional agreement, while the governor's expression suggests slight discomfort at the implicit criticism of governmental failures. The systemic breakdown required for such operations to continue undetected reflects poorly on multiple institutions, creating complicated political calculations even during recognition ceremonies. "What happens next?" the hunter asks, shifting focus from acknowledgement to ongoing accountability. The federal prosecutor outlines current status: 48 individuals in custody awaiting trial, international investigators documenting violations of chemical and biological weapons conventions, congressional oversight committees reviewing regulatory failures that permitted the operation, an ongoing investigation into financial networks that facilitated decades of prohibited research. The full accountability process will likely continue for years, the prosecutor acknowledges. Some aspects may remain classified indefinitely given national security implications, but core prosecutions for human rights violations will proceed with appropriate public transparency. The victim's advocate adds, "We're establishing a permanent memorial and documentation center to ensure this history isn't buried again." The focus remains on victims' experiences rather than technical details that could enable replication. The hunter appreciates the balance: public acknowledgement of what occurred without creating instruction manuals for similar operations. The conversation continues for another 30 minutes, covering practical security considerations, timeline for remaining private and public records, and communication protocols for providing additional information as needed for ongoing investigations. As the meeting concludes, the governor offers a final observation. Most whistleblowers come forward from within systems they've participated in building. Your situation, accidental discovery followed by methodical investigation despite increasing personal risk, represents something different, something worth remembering when we discuss civic responsibility. The hunter accepts the comment with a slight nod, understanding the political calculation behind framing his actions as exemplary citizenship rather than indictment of failed oversight. The ceremony concludes with brief handshakes, the participants returning to their respective roles in the continuing accountability process. Outside the government building, standing momentarily on the steps before descending to the street, the hunter allows himself to reflect on the personal cost of the past month, the ordinary life interrupted, the ongoing security precautions for his family, the knowledge that certain powerful interests remain motivated to discourage further investigation. The rusted safe's contents have irreversibly altered his relationship with seemingly trustworthy institutions, revealing capacity for compartmentalized atrocity behind bureaucratic facades. Yet something else emerged alongside the darkness: individuals within those same institutions who responded with genuine commitment when evidence finally penetrated institutional barriers. The investigators working extended hours to identify victims, the prosecutors building meticulous cases against powerful defendants, the medical professionals developing treatment protocols for survivors, all representing human capacity for correction once truth becomes undeniable. The hunter descends the steps, moving unnoticed among pedestrians navigating their daily routines. The city continues its normal patterns while simultaneously absorbing revelations that challenge fundamental assumptions about institutional trustworthiness. Both realities coexist, daily life proceeding while foundations shift beneath seemingly stable structures. 6 months after the discovery of the rusted safe, the hunter stands on his back porch, watching dawn illuminate the desert landscape surrounding his modest home. The property shows subtle changes: enhanced security systems integrated discreetly into the existing structure, new communication equipment providing secure connections to investigative teams, reinforced physical barriers that maintain aesthetic consistency with the original design. His personal appearance has similarly returned to baseline with minor adaptations. The familiar desert-appropriate clothing, the weathered features shaped by decades in harsh environments, the watchful attentiveness that predated recent events but now carries additional dimensions of awareness. The hunter's professional life has resumed with careful modifications. His guiding services continue for select clients, the expeditions focusing on areas distinct from those connected to the facility investigation. Local residents treat him with a combination of respect and careful distance, acknowledgement of his role in exposing significant threats, while maintaining the privacy such actions have rendered necessary. His relationship with the landscape itself has transformed most significantly. The desert that once represented straightforward wilderness challenge now carries layered meanings. The visible terrain concealing potential human activities beneath apparently untouched surfaces, the remote regions harboring both natural isolation and calculated concealment, the unforgiving environment serving both ecological function and operational security for those with sufficient resources. The hunter sips coffee from a battered travel mug, watching a red-tailed hawk circle against the brightening sky. The daily patterns of desert wildlife continue unchanged despite human revelations. Predator and prey, adaptation and vulnerability, survival strategies refined through countless generations. The constancy provides grounding amid institutional recalibrations still unfolding months after initial exposure. His satellite phone vibrates with incoming message, the weekly update from federal investigators that maintains his connection to ongoing accountability processes. The communication pattern established during initial evidence collection has evolved into regular briefing protocols, acknowledging both his continued security vulnerabilities and his legitimate interest in case progression. The message outlines recent developments. Additional arrests, including 2 former regional officials who facilitated regulatory exemptions, identification of 15 previously unknown victims through DNA analysis, congressional approval for expanded compensation programs, and international protocols implementing enhanced inspection regimes for remote research facilities. The systematic dismantling of operational infrastructure continues alongside institutional reforms designed to prevent similar recurrence. The hunter acknowledges receipt with standardized response, the communication complete within 90 seconds. Efficient information exchange that maintains security through brevity. The ongoing investigation has established the operational discipline that characterizes effective intelligence gathering, a professional adaptation to circumstances rather than paranoid response to discovered threats. His teenage daughter emerges from the house, preparing for school with the resilience of youth adapting to changed circumstances. Their relationship has strengthened through shared adversity, the necessary security measures, and temporary relocation, having opened communication channels previously constricted by adolescent independence and parental restraint. The immediate threat has diminished sufficiently for normal educational routines to resume, albeit with enhanced awareness and established protocols for potential security concerns. "Still on for camping this weekend?" she asks, the planned expedition representing return to activities temporarily suspended during acute investigation phases. The hunter nods affirmation. The wilderness skills that once represented primarily recreational and professional dimensions now carry additional significance. Self-sufficiency separate from institutional protection, awareness beyond standard safety considerations, capability for independent response if established systems prove insufficient. As his daughter departs for school, transportation now including security measures invisible to casual observation, the hunter returns to preparations for the day's professional commitments. A guided expedition for wildlife photographers will occupy standard working hours, the routine providing both economic continuity and maintained public presence that discourages perception of continued vulnerability. The hunter stands alone at the coordinates where he first discovered the rusted safe, the location now transformed by recent history. Federal investigation has expanded the initial excavation, revealing additional document caches and equipment fragments that confirmed connections between the safe's contents and the larger operational infrastructure. The site now bears markers of systematic evidence collection, gridded search patterns visible in disturbed soil, numbered location indicators partially buried by wind-blown sand, perimeter boundaries established for comprehensive documentation. The methodical process has altered the natural appearance, while preserving critical evidence for ongoing prosecutions. Beyond physical changes, the location carries transformed significance, no longer merely remote desert terrain, but acknowledged historical site where accountability processes began after decades of concealment. The coordinates now appear in official investigation records, court documents, and eventual historical accounts of operations that violated fundamental human rights protections while exploiting institutional compartmentalization. The hunter observes these changes with professional detachment, recognizing how seemingly minor discoveries can initiate cascading revelations when properly documented and persistently investigated. His accidental role in this process, the chance discovery while pursuing unrelated activities, underscores how thin the membrane between ordinary life and extraordinary revelation can become in specific circumstances. He kneels, examining the soil composition with habitual attention to detail. The desert continues its natural processes despite human intervention. Erosion patterns redistributing sand around investigation markers, plant life establishing tentative presence in disturbed areas, insect activity resuming normal patterns after human departure. The resilience reflects broader natural systems that continue functioning despite temporary disruption. Rising, the hunter performs a personal ritual established during recent months, a moment of silent acknowledgement for victims whose names remain unknown despite ongoing identification efforts. The formal memorial planned for completion next year will provide public recognition, but this private ceremony addresses immediate human impact that official processes sometimes obscure behind institutional language and legal frameworks. As sunset colors deepen across the western horizon, the hunter begins his return journey with measured pace that respects both remaining daylight and established security protocols. His relationship with this specific terrain has permanently altered, professional tracking skills now supplemented by awareness of potential surveillance, standard wilderness precautions expanded to include counterintelligence measures, natural environmental awareness broadened to recognize indicators of human activity designed to avoid detection. Yet something remains incomplete despite investigative thoroughness and accountability processes. Certain central questions persist without definitive answers. Which specific individuals initiated the program decades earlier? What ultimate purpose justified systematic human rights violations? How compartmentalization maintained operational security despite scale requiring substantial resources? The justice system proceeds with prosecutable offenses, while complete understanding remains elusive. The hunter accepts this ambiguity as characteristic of complex human systems. Clarity existing alongside persistent shadows, accountability occurring within parameters of institutional self-preservation, truth emerging in patterns rather than comprehensive revelation. His role involved initiating processes rather than ensuring complete resolution, exposing operations rather than dismantling every underlying structure that enabled their existence. Reaching his vehicle as twilight fades toward darkness, the hunter performs standard security protocols before departure, checking for tracking devices, confirming communication equipment functionality, verifying unobstructed exit routes. The practices have integrated into normal wilderness procedures, additional layers of awareness that acknowledge changed circumstances while refusing to permit fear to dominate daily function. As he navigates familiar desert roads toward home, the hunter acknowledges that certain mysteries will likely remain unresolved despite thorough investigation. Some participants will evade justice through legal technicalities, institutional protection, or resource advantages. Some victims will remain unidentified despite dedicated efforts. Some operational aspects will resist complete explanation despite documentation and testimony. This incomplete resolution reflects broader human experience, justice functioning as ongoing process rather than definitive achievement, truth emerging through persistent effort rather than singular revelation, accountability requiring sustained attention rather than momentary exposure. The hunter's accidental role in this specific instance represents one contribution to continuous human struggle against concealment of unconscionable activities. 1 year after discovering the rusted safe, the hunter stands at a familiar overlook as dawn illuminates the landscape that has defined his professional identity for nearly 2 decades. The vista remains fundamentally unchanged. Ancient geological formations shaped by millennia of natural forces, ecosystem functioning through established patterns of survival and adaptation, wilderness extending beyond artificial boundaries imposed by human designation. Yet his perception has transformed permanently. The visible terrain now representing surface layer above potential human activities, remote locations harboring both natural isolation and deliberate concealment, apparently pristine wilderness potentially containing evidence of operations designed to avoid detection. The awareness doesn't diminish appreciation for natural systems, but adds dimensional understanding of human capacity for exploiting isolation. The hunter adjusts his worn canvas hat, the same one mentioned in the narrative's opening scene, now carrying additional history alongside its original significance. The familiar weight represents continuity amid transformed understanding, maintained identity despite altered perception, resilience following revelations that might have fundamentally disrupted established patterns. A red-tailed hawk circles overhead, perhaps the same individual observed during that first morning described a year earlier, perhaps different representative of species continuing existence regardless of human discoveries below. The predator's hunting pattern remains unchanged despite ground-level revelations. Natural systems proceeding according to evolutionary imperatives, while human systems undergo recalibration following exposure. The hunter watches the hawk with professional appreciation for evolutionary adaptations that perfect its hunting capabilities, keen vision detecting minimal movement from significant height, wing structure enabling efficient soaring that conserves energy while maximizing observational range, patience that permits extended assessment before decisive action. These same characteristics served his accidental investigation, attention to anomalous details, efficient resource utilization during extended documentation, strategic patience during evidence collection. As sunlight strengthens across the landscape, the hunter acknowledges both what has changed and what remains consistent following the safe's discovery. Institutional accountability processes continue through established legal frameworks. Victim identification proceeds with scientific methodology. International protocols implement enhanced inspection regimes. Simultaneously, power imbalances persist within systems designed to regulate themselves. Compartmentalization enables deniability, despite operational scale, and complete transparency remains constrained by institutional self-preservation. The hunter accepts this complex reality without surrendering to cynicism, acknowledging limitations while recognizing genuine progress, understanding institutional constraints while appreciating individual commitment within imperfect systems, recognizing both achievements and remaining challenges in accountability processes. The balanced perspective permits continued engagement rather than withdrawal from seemingly compromised structures. As he prepares to depart the Overlook and return to routine professional activities, the hunter reflects on how accidental discovery transformed both individual perception and broader institutional awareness. The rusted safe's contents initiated cascading revelations that remain incomplete but substantially advanced understanding of what occurred beneath seemingly empty desert terrain. Truth emerged through persistent documentation rather than instantaneous exposure. Accountability developed through sustained pressure rather than immediate capitulation. The experience reinforces core principles that guided his wilderness profession long before encountering evidence of concealed operations. Patience revealing what casual observation misses, systematic documentation preserving what momentary perception captures, persistent attention exposing what intentional concealment protects. These approaches serve both tracking desert wildlife and uncovering human activities designed to avoid detection. The hunter descends from the Overlook with measured steps that respect both terrain and transformed understanding. Whatever remains concealed beyond current investigation, whatever operations continue undetected in remote locations, whatever accountability remains incomplete despite substantial progress, the fundamental principle stands validated. Persistent observation eventually reveals what deliberate concealment temporarily protects. The desert keeps certain secrets, as all complex systems do, but dedicated attention ultimately exposes patterns that connect isolated discoveries to larger operations. The rusted safe represented one access point to broader understanding, one thread leading to extensive networks, one exposed element revealing systematic activities. The hunter's accidental role in following that thread to its institutional origins demonstrates how individual persistence can initiate accountability processes despite significant resistance from established powers. Don't forget to subscribe for the next investigative documentary where ordinary discoveries reveal extraordinary operations continuing beyond public awareness. The truth remains partially concealed, but persistent attention eventually exposes what deliberate systems attempt to bury in seemingly empty terrain.